Jiggy jiggy boom, 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 jiggy jiggy boom. State little hands.
Okie dokeroony.
Hey.
This is my name is Graham Patrick Talley over here,
And my name is Ashkahn.
and today's question is actually taken off of Reddit, so not a user submitted one this time. And it's, why is it that you only see vertical float tanks in historical photos and science fiction movies? I think they look totally badass. I'd love to try one.
Yeah, so I mean, they are around. There are vertical tanks out there.
They exist.
They exist.
We know of a couple.
Yeah, we know of one or two. And one of the reasons we know of vertical tanks is because we're maybe 10 feet away from one right now.
Yep, our recording studio is also right next to vertical float tanks, designed by another one of our float-on owners, Christopher. Paul Messer.
Yeah. And so, they do still exist. They're just there's just one guy making them, Christopher.
And I guess, okay, so there's you need to differentiate between like two different kinds of vertical tanks.
Yeah.
So there's like vertical tanks where you're fully submerged and your head is underwater and you need some kind of apparatus to breathe. And then there's vertical tanks where your head is above water and that's maintained maybe also with salt water in the solution that you're going into.
So yeah, there's like the old vertical tanks from back in the day, like you see in there's like altered states sort of style.
And that's the sci-fi movie half of his question.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, which I don't think anything quite like exactly like that is existed, where your like entire body is under.
You mean commercially? Because they definitely existed. Like that's what he.
Well, yeah, I guess they made one for the movie, but like when what they were basing those off of is I think the old research tanks from back in the day, which was they didn't have any salt. They were these big kind of cylindrical things of water that you would get into, and you'd wear like a face mask that they would totally black out so you couldn't see anything, and you'd have a breathing tube, but. You'd kind of just be like lying. You'd be in the water with your face down, but nothing was like forcing you like under the water. Or they weren't filling something up with water and like sealing you into it. Like,
if you thought like being in a lay down float tank felt like being in a womb, like that's kind of like embryonic, like seeing the pictures of people floating just totally submerged in water like that.
Yeah, so I've never seen a real life version of like the back to container from Star Wars or the Altered States thing where someone's
or
like
Stranger Things too, another one that had the
Stranger
vertical
Things
tank
had
recently.
yeah. So like the closest thing to that I've seen in real life is that where you're kind of just like you're in the thing and usually you had little floaties on your arms. I think when they started to make it so you don't just kind of like sink all the way into the water.
Mm-hmm.
And then we added salt and made them these like horizontal things that we kind of know of as float tanks nowadays.
Yep, and vertical tanks. So there's also like one other company. We'll put it in the show notes that I found recently.
Yeah,
that
just
was
recently
releasing,
that popped up.
Like in the last month or two, I think that we stumbled across it. Or anyway, so that's interesting. There's another company out there apparently who's mainly like a posture and fitness company, but who has gotten into this idea of doing vertical float tanks specifically for your posture and spinal alignment is kind of what they're pitching it. So yeah, we'll put a link so you can check them out. Put a link to Vertical Tank Center, which is the one we're talking about, and right now they're also there's kind of this in between tank, which is actually more like the ones that are right next to us right now.
Yeah.
Chris is our other owner has made some full on vertical tanks where your entire body up to your neck is submerged. I guess we should even just talk a little bit about those designs before we get into the meta tanks.
Because they're kind of cool. I mean, we tried them out. Like they're really interesting. Like the biggest kind of like most robust one he built was like in ground. So he actually dug a hole out of the ground and had the like vertical tank kind of be submerged down into it. And you climb like a little ladder down into it. And the thing itself was maybe I want to say like 4 feet by 4 feet in terms of the
footprint or whatever.
Yeah, footprint, and then it went down like 6 or 7 feet. And he still put some salt in there to help with the buoyancy, but not anywhere close to the kind of float tank levels of salt that are in there. And one of the reasons is you don't need it. Like you can stay kind of above the water with just a slightly higher buoyancy than normal water. But also there's kind of this challenge when you're vertical, which is that your body really wants to be horizontal. Like your feet keep trying to like pop up. Like it's not very easy to like keep yourself perfectly vertically centered. And so what you actually have to do is you have to put some weights on your body. Like you have to put weights on your ankles, and sometimes even like depending on your body type and stuff like that, more or less weight to try to get the kind of right balance. And even then, like, it took a little bit of effort to kind of maintain that perfect like vertical area. And I even tried putting weights on my arms, because otherwise your arms kind of pop up and want to hang out right at the surface level as well. But arms up or arms down both kind of felt pretty good. And it's just a very different experience. Like, it honestly felt like a first float again for me.
Yeah.
Like, it was so much different
Breathing
about it.
has a lot more to do with it too. Like, when you breathe in, you really noticeably kind of rise in the water and then sink down with your exhales.
Yep.
And so there's this like, almost like balance you have to hit, which eventually becomes conscious. But at the beginning is you're much more aware of where you really don't want your nose to like drop below the level of the water because you're exhaling.
And I felt very present, like, and kind of aware of my surroundings, but then slowly started still to like dip into that kind of floaty space. And so it almost didn't let you like totally kind of get into that like much more like sleepy sort of thing that can happen in a float tank. Like, you're kind of like present and floaty when you're up vertical like that. So it was cool. It was a really cool experience, and I was almost surprised at how different it felt than floating in kind of our horizontal float tanks.
Yeah, if you ever get a chance to try it out, I'd totally recommend it. I have no advice on where to find a vertical float tank near you, but if one turns up, or you hear that your neighbor has been building one in his basement, definitely go take a peek.
Oh yeah, or if you're here for the float conference, Christopher always tries to get people who are interested out here to his place to try his tank out.
Yeah, that's a great point. Which I guess takes us to the next manifestation of the vertical tanks, which aren't this full kind of 6 or 7 foot tall tank, but more of a 4 or 5 foot tall tank that he calls his meta tanks, like meditation tanks, where you kind of sit in them more, or sit cross-legged in the tank. So almost like you're still vertical, but it's like half vertical, because you're taking this more of a meditative cross-legged posture.
Which really, there's just, you can make any style and size of float tank, which is like my dream is like Olympic swimming pool float tank. One of these days, I just want, full like 80 feet long,
but still only like a couple feet deep.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be that deep, but like I just want it to be really, really big surface area. Like, I want to be able to push off on one side and just like coast for 20 minutes until I hit the other side.
You can do that in float tanks right now. I feel like that happens almost every single float.
Well, there's something about like when you push off the side of a float tank,
knowing that it's actually humongous.
It just feels really like the feeling of moving through the water feels really cool to me. And like, I do it in my floats all the time. I'll like push off, and then I'll hit the other wall in like 10 seconds. Like, I'm trying to push real slowly to like have a nice coast time. But like, the idea of just having like tens of feet, like, it just sounds awesome. So
no, it does sound awesome. I'm not arguing with you. It sounds amazing. Yeah.
So they exist.
Wait, what was the other half of that?
It
was historical photos. Oh yeah, we covered that. That's like the old
research tanks.
Yeah, exactly. NIH was the word I was trying, or the abbreviation I was trying to look for. NSF kept popping to mind. Great. So hopefully that answered your questions. And yeah, they exist. You can see them. You should if you're the one who submitted this question, go on a hunt or come out here to Portland for the Float Conference and check them out.
If you guys have other questions, you can go to floattanksolutions.com/podcast.
Shoot them our way. We love getting them.
Yeah.
Let's go do that right now.
Yeah.
If you're listening to this, whoever you are, go online. You send us a question.
Yeah, we'll wait here
For a reasonable amount of time, not like for forever.
That's probably.
I'm getting a little
bored.
Enough.
Yeah,
all
right, we gotta go. We'll talk to you later.